Have you ever stopped to think about how a massive company, say a soda maker, knows the exact cost of one single can when they're churning out millions a day? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down. We're diving deep into a super important tool in process costing called the cost of production report. Let's get right into it.
And just a quick note before we jump in, all the great material we're covering today was prepared by Samir Al-Rashani, PhD, with AI support. We're going to walk through the key ideas to make sure you get a really practical handle on it.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll cover what this report even is. Then, we'll get into why managers absolutely love it. After that, we'll dissect its three main parts. And then, the fun part, we'll roll up our sleeves with a case study and build a report from the ground up. All right, so first things first, what in the world is a cost of production report? Okay, so the cost of production report, or CPR for short, is basically the command center for a single department in a big manufacturing process. Think of a bottling plant or a chemical factory. For a specific time, like 1 month, this report tracks everything, every single unit and every single dollar that moves through that department. The whole point? To figure out the average cost for one identical item. Now, here's a great way to think about it. If you've ever heard of job order costing, like for building a custom home or a one-of-a-kind piece of furniture, you'd use a job cost sheet. That sheet tracks all the costs for that one specific job. Well, the CPR is the equivalent for process costing. But instead of one unique job, it's tracking the costs for thousands, even millions, of identical units pouring through an entire department. Same idea, just on a much bigger scale. Okay, so we know what it is. But really, why should a busy manager care? Well, this is where the report goes from being just a boring accounting form to a seriously powerful tool for making decisions. For a manager, this report is like a crystal ball. It doesn't just give you numbers, it tells you a story. You can see things like, whoa, our conversion costs shot up this month. Is a machine breaking down? Or you can finally answer questions like, did that expensive new piece of equipment we bought actually lower our per unit costs? It lets you spot bottlenecks and find ways to be more efficient that you'd never see otherwise. And this quote just nails it. The CPR is a scorecard. It's like a monthly report card for the whole production department. It tells you where you're crushing it, where you're falling behind, and most importantly, why. It's all about making smarter moves for the future. So now that we know why it's so important, let's pull back the curtain and see how it's actually put together. It's actually built in 3 really logical sections. It all rests on these 3 pillars. First, we have the quantity schedule. That's just counting our physical stuff. Second, we figure out the cost per equivalent unit. This is where we calculate the price tag for a single finished product. And finally, the cost reconciliation, which is where we prove that every single penny is accounted for. Each step builds right on top of the last one. Pillar number 1, the quantity schedule. This part is super simple. It's basically just a head count for all our units. It asks one question. How many units were we responsible for, and where did they all go? We track the units we started with, the new ones we added, and then confirm whether they got finished or are still being worked on. Now, this next part is the real heart of the report. It's where the magic happens. See, the big challenge is that at the end of the month, you've got a bunch of finished units, but also a bunch of half-finished ones. So you can't just divide your total cost by the total number of units, right? That wouldn't be accurate. This is where we use a clever idea called equivalent units. It's just a way of converting those partially done units into a smaller number of make-believe finished ones. It's the key to getting a true cost per unit. And finally, our third pillar, the cost reconciliation. This is the grand finale, our final double check. It makes sure that all the costs we started with are fully accounted for. The cost of the finished goods, plus the cost of the stuff still in inventory, has to perfectly match all the costs we put in. It's the ultimate proof that our math is solid. Okay, enough theory. You know the best way to really understand this thing? It's to build one. So let's get our hands dirty. We're going to dive into our case study for the XYZ company and see how this all works with real numbers. So here's the situation. At the start of January, Department X had 20,000 units already in the works. Now, notice, they were 100% done with materials. That makes sense. Companies often add all the materials right at the start. But they were only 30% done with conversion costs. That's the labor and overhead that happens throughout the process. Then, during the month, they started another 180,000 units and added more costs. At the end of it all, 170,000 units were totally finished, leaving 30,000 still in progress. And those were now 40% complete on conversion. All right, we've got our data. We are ready to go. Let's build this report one section at a time. And we're going to start with the easiest part, the quantity schedule. Step 1 is a piece of cake. We started with 20,000 units, right? And we added 180,000 more. So that means we need to account for a grand total of 200,000 units. The data tells us we finished 170,000 of them and had 30,000 left over. You add those two up, and what do you know? 200,000. It balances. The physical units are all accounted for. Perfect. Okay, now for that trickier part we talked about, equivalent units. For the 170,000 units that were completed and sent out, it's easy. They're 100% done, so that's 170,000 equivalent units for both materials and conversion. But what about the 30,000 units still in process? Well, we know they're 100% complete for materials, so that's a full 30,000 equivalent units. For conversion costs, though, they're only 40% done. So we take 40% of 30,000, which gives us 12,000 equivalent units. Now we just add them up. That gives us our totals, 200,000 equivalent units for materials and 182,000 for conversion. Okay, time to talk money. With the weighted average method, we basically just blend the old costs from our starting inventory with the new costs from this month. So for materials, we take the starting cost of $54,500 and add the new cost of $418,000. That's a total of $472,500. We divide that by our 200,000 equivalent units for materials, and we get a cost of about $2.36 per unit. We do the exact same thing for conversion, and that comes out to about $1.63 per unit. And this, my friends, is the golden number. This is what we've been working towards. We add our material cost per unit to our conversion cost per unit, and we get our total cost for one fully completed unit, just under $4. For any manager, this number is everything. It's the benchmark you use to track costs, set prices, and make all kinds of decisions. So let's use it to finish our report. All right, we're in the home stretch. This is the final step where we put a dollar value on everything. For the 170,000 units we finished, it's simple. Multiply that by our total cost per unit, and we get about $679,000. For the inventory we have left over, we have to value the materials and conversion costs separately. So we take their equivalent units and multiply them by their own costs per unit. That gives us a total value for our ending inventory of about $90,000. Add those two big numbers together, and we've accounted for a total of $769,500. And now, the moment of truth. Does it all balance? Let's check our work. The total costs we had to account for, that's the cost from the beginning inventory plus all the new costs we added, came to $769,500. And the costs we did account for, the value of the units we finished plus the value of what's left, also comes out to $769,500. It's a perfect match. Our report is balanced, and we are done. So what's the big takeaway here? The cost of production report isn't just a bunch of numbers on a page. It's the whole story of your production for the month. It's a logical journey from counting your stuff to figuring out what it costs to making sure every dollar is where it's supposed to be. And that makes it one of the most powerful tools you can have for controlling costs, seeing how well you're doing, and figuring out the value of your inventory. So there you have it, the cost of production report, from start to finish. We've gone through what it is, why it matters, and how to build one. But the real power comes when you actually use it. So I'll leave you with this to think about. Now that you know how to do this, what hidden stories, what problems or opportunities might be hiding in plain sight in the numbers of your own processes?